From the halls of Austin to the fights in D.C. that hit us at home, this is Politics with the Big Dogs.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Oh, my goodness, we have an incredible show today. I want us to take a moment, and we'll do this more as we approach July 4th and beyond, but at the foundation of our value system, and I'm suggesting our values being the listeners, conservatives, lovers of liberty, Americans, is the Declaration of Independence, right? Which is a really short document. It's like 1,400 words. If you remember a written paper, I still get one. Hallelujah! I really enjoy the newspaper. Most people read online, but if you remember the written newspaper, 1,400 words is like one editorial. It's about a third of a newspaper, so it's really short. And Neil Gorsuch, a U.S. Supreme Court justice, he's been putting out some writings of late, and one of them struck me that I want to make sure that we're thinking about, we keep top of mind always. And it's this. And Neil said, let's remember that in recorded history, in 2,000 plus years of recorded human history, we've not had a group of people in a community and now a nation come together based on values such as this. And essentially, he said, look, the Declaration of Independence was a note to the king just saying, we are no longer under your rule, and it's premised on three big ideas that shocked the world 1,700 years after Christ, which is fascinating, right? 1,700 years, and these three ideas. Number one, every human is born equal. Oh, no, right? Like all through the 1,700 plus years and the thousands prior, but I'm talking about recorded history, well-recorded history since Jesus walked, that and notion that all humans shall be born equal. It was astounding, and it rocked. It really shook the foundations of so much of the world. Shook them because it was based on inheritance and upper class and dukes and earls and kings and a ruling class that had powers and authority that were unequal because they were greater than all of the peasants. You and I, all these flyover states, per Hillary Clinton, she still had that mindset. So number one, humans are born equal. Number two, God grants us rights premised on three opportunities. These are God-given liberties, and they cannot be stripped by government, a king, or any ruling class. And they are life, but primarily focused on the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to pursuit of happiness. And then the third foundation, the three-legged stool, proverbial three-legged stool, we the people have the right to govern ourselves. That's the electoral process. So there's no king, there's no hybrid, and of course we were coming from England, which had a House of Commons, right? All the commoners, the people like you and I that Hillary Clinton was just denouncing, and Barack Obama, and all these commoners who don't know, and then the Lords, right? The Chamber of Lords, which you inherit that seat. My father was an earl or a duke or a lord, and we are going to keep this. The Commons and the Lords, and those are the bicameral, the two agents of government. Well, we rejected that wholly, and we said, we believe that all humans are born equal in 1776. We believe that God gives us these opportunities of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and meaning very important that they can't be stripped. And then third, we the people self-govern. Well, this was just as radical as it got in the world at the time, but also for the 1,776 years since recorded history. Like Gorsuch reminds you and I and Americans, this was so unusual and so radical, and look how long it took. 1,776 years for a group to get the gumption to say, no, here is our values. Here is what we believe in our faith and in our soul, and we're willing to die for it. We're willing to lose our lands, our life, and our children because we know you, the British, are coming to invade us to stomp out these ideas and these beliefs. And then Gorsuch also reminds us, Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence in rooms that he rented from a bricklayer. Just a normal old fella is like, hey, let me rent a room, and sat in there and drafted the Declaration of Independence. And you and I, and Americans who are dismissive, in my opinion, of this honor and this gift we inherited from our fathers for 250 years, which is a blink in history. But the Declaration's three great ideas are still front and center, right? We're all equal. And suffrage, women got equal rights in 1840s, 1850s, right? So it took another 80 years for the females to say, well, wait a second, the U.S. Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, we are people, we are born equally. Why don't we have these rights? And they went and they took them, and they should have, because we have this beautiful governing document that no one out of the many billions and billions of humans who have lived outside of the U.S. and prior to this point in time ever had the benefit of. I mean, what a gift that we have gotten. And then African Americans said, hey, separate but equal is not equal. What about the Declaration of Independence? And that took a lot longer, right? It was almost 200 years later. It was in the 1960s and into the 70s and 80s. And that what we were doing as society was clearly not equal and right and not in keeping with our founding documents. But Gorsuch lays out what I believe is a really beautiful reminder for all of us that says, hey, don't take these things for granted. Don't forget about this gift that was on the blood, sweat, and tears, and we overuse that phrase, but it's so apropos in this moment of all the soldiers who have died and all the families who have sacrificed to deliver the continued values of the Declaration of Independence to this nation, right? And look what it did. And yes, it took almost 100 years for women and almost 200 years for African Americans, but this idea, this notion that is scary to every other governmental system of tyrants and Russia and China and North Korea and families inheriting power. You get to self-govern. You have rights that God granted you that the government cannot strip and shall not strip. And then we amended, right, these, like the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. You get to, if government tries to strip you of those rights, you can protect yourself. So a nation founded on the hope of realizing equality, liberty, and self-government for its citizens, writes Gorsuch. Wow. You and I are inherently living this and talking about it and defending it. But to stop and take a breath and refamiliarize ourselves with the bravery and the words and the notion of equality of all humans born, liberty being defined largely in the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of life, and as a function of liberty, and then self-governance, unheard of, and still not very common in the world, right? Just not very common. For all the other 7.3-ish billion people living today, very few have this, what we have. And then Gorsuch goes on and says, Daniel Webster, of course, the Webster Dictionary, observed it took thousands of years of human history for a nation devoted to the Declaration's three great ideas to arise, and miracles like that do not cluster. We are a miracle, and I didn't have anything to do with it. I inherited it. And you may have had a lot to do with it, but I suspect you mostly inherited it as well. We had the incredible blessing to be born in this nation where 250 years ago, a group of individuals got together and said, hey, there's got to be a better system. I feel God inside of me. I feel the touch inside of me and the light. And I know that God wants us to govern in this way and believes that we are all his creatures, and we all have inalienable rights granted to us by God, and that we the people, shall self-govern. You know, we were not intended to have senators be in place for 24 years or pushing for 30 with Cornyn, or these congressmen for 20 and 30 years. The power of incumbency and the fear of people who don't run against them. We were supposed to be a citizen-led legislature and citizen-led government. In theory, we are, because we're having elections, but it's becoming more and more of it's slipping back to the haves and the have-nots, and the haves being, in this instance, in power, having the power of government, either elected for decades with no real fear of being defeated to their elected post, or people who have influence with them. And that is straying from our incredible gift and our inheritance. So I'm going to suggest to all of us that we may have a duty to defend these principles, and you may interpret your duty differently than I do. I'm going to suggest that we have a duty to ensure that we are governed by the people, not just through an election, but that people are rotating through elections, or anyone who is granted the gift of governance of 8 or 10 years is still motivated by our central needs and not the needs of Washington or the needs of Austin, right? We're watching these groups who spend $100 million to maintain power in the Texas legislature for the last 30-plus years, like a Texans for lawsuit reform. And I've got to be honest, I helped them do that for some period of my career when I was more aligned with their values. And last session, they had at least one bill that I was in alignment with, so I supported them. But on a whole, I'm opposed to any group or any individual staying in power for so long because, absolute power ultimately corrupts absolutely. And I probably cut up somebody else's beautiful quote there, but you understand my point, right? And whether you like or dislike Governor Abbott and think he could do more or think he could do less, he is now running for, years 13, 14, 15, 16 in office? We got 31 million Texans in here. I wonder if we wouldn't have a whole bunch of really effective leaders out there. We got Cornyn trying to go for 30 years. We have these folks just holding on to power no matter what. And it is straying, certainly, from our Declaration of Independence and the foundational ideals of America. And I believe, I'm going to suggest to you, the foundational ideals of Texans. So I'm very appreciative of Justice Gorsuch, independent of any decisions that he's made as a U.S. Supreme Court justice. I'm incredibly appreciative of him taking a moment and writing this and reminding us all of the gift and the weight and the gravity of our inheritance and how we have to fight to ensure our children and their children continue this opportunity, because it will be stripped from them unless we fight vigilantly. In 2,000 years of recorded history, this is the only little blurb of that history. And I don't mean to discount the United States by calling it a blurb, but it is. It's just this little bleep on the timeline of history of now 8-ish billion people walking the earth, and we, the 330 million who are so fortunate to be born here or to be allowed to live in a nation designed with 3 fundamental principles: God-given liberty, self-governance, and equality as a people. Holy smoke. There's still a king of England. There's still a king in Spain. There's still kings and ruling classes, all a House of Lords, right, in England. And we think of these places as pretty developed. When you go into Muslim and radical Islamist states, it's tribal, and it's Saudi Arabia with kings and princes and Morocco and much of Africa, and just oppression with no fundamental rights. And if we let this slip away, it might be 2,000 years before humans experience it again. So I'm going to suggest that I, as an individual born here in America, I want to spread this around the world. I want to spread democracy and our values of liberty, of inalienable rights, of granted inviolable rights by God, and self-government, because I love humanity. I think people should have opportunity, and part of our function is to help spread the ideas, is to proselytize democracy. Thank you for indulging. Thank you for helping us remember who we are, how we got here, and thank you so much for helping defend these values. We are America. We are a shining light up on the hill of history. And it's incumbent on you and I to make sure our children are learning this and recognizing this and honoring it in school, because they've taken over in our public schools and they're trying to indoctrinate them into other beliefs and identities and values. And we must make sure that we defend this incredible gift that these brave founding fathers and all these soldiers and all these folks who have led government in such a way to keep it available to us for the last 250 years. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Please follow us, sign up for our newsletter, politicswiththebigdogs.com. We have to move on to our next subject, but boy, I'm so honored. It is such a privilege to have been born in this nation, and I'm thankful and grateful that you're here with me.
Love what you're hearing? Find all of our shows at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Subscribe to our newsletter and send in your questions. politicswiththebigdogs.com.
All right, folks, Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs here. Almost too much to cover. There's just so much action, so much news. But this one, who knew the rise of Islam was so substantial in Texas? We've talked about it a lot of late, only because we keep stumbling upon more and more of it. So get this. There is a Muslim university in Texas, the first one in America. They call it the Texas American Muslim University at Dallas. Tex A&M University. Go figure. This is a university that has been recognized, clearly slid through the cracks, or really, maybe it didn't, right? It's folks like us who have exposed and shut down the Muslim-only water park, for example, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now we find, oh, guess what? It turns out there's a Muslim university in Texas. So now the Higher Ed Coordinating Board, which is a accrediting agency in the state appointed by Abbott, suddenly they're aware of it and trying to shut it down too. But my question is, we didn't shut down that Muslim-only water park issue until it was the third year. It was the third year. So they've had 2 years of this in the Metroplex where they've taken, for you, those of you who didn't listen last week, there was an Epic water park. Has nothing to do with the Epic, the East Plano Islamist community that we've talked a lot about. And again, that's a 400-plus development in the Plano-Richardson area, right under Representative Jeff Leach's nose for all these years. Nothing's happened, right? Who are a Muslim community, and they're only going to sell to Muslims, and they're going to have Muslim schools, and they're going to have Muslim lifestyles and, Muslim outfits and try to self-govern right there in the middle of Collin County. Holy smokes, go figure. So this has been brewing. Turns out the more you and I, people who care about this stuff, who believe in American values, who aren't afraid to go out there and say, wait a second, are these the type of values we want in our communities? We are then finding that Epic Water Park, which was a city-paid, county-funded, it's almost $90 million in local tax dollars, to build a really cool, huge indoor water park, indoor-outdoor. Well, it turns out CARE, this Collin County area Islamic group, had rented it out and closed it and done a Muslim-only water park day to celebrate one of their holidays coming up at the end of May or early June. And this is the third year running, but you and I and others found out about it. We exposed it. We went into not the mainstream media because they won't cover our stuff, but we went to conservatives and say, hey, this isn't right. This is a taxpayer-funded entity. You can't shut it down. You can't exclude people by religion. And also, do we really want folks wearing burqas and having halal food and taking over taxpayer-funded entities on a disconnection with our values? America is very clearly a Judeo Christian country. We can all debate whether immigration should be blocked entirely or slowed or what we want to do, but I don't think any of us are going to debate that if people are going to come here, we want them coming here because of our values. They share our values, and they're seeking a better life, not to change our values. And this long stream of radical Islamist takeovers of Texas, legions and legions of mosques, and people are calls to prayer several times a day in communities, particularly in Collin County and Richardson, Plano, that East Plano area. So, for example, the mayor of Richardson's now a Muslim. Okay, the people got to vote, and that's who they elected. But I got to wonder, is it because it's like Dearborn? So many, a takeover of one group of people, like Dearborn, Michigan? Is it one group of people that Obama imported into Minneapolis? So you have Haitians and others and Somalis running that area? Is that what is happening in Texas? And perhaps. So now the latest thing that we uncover, you and I and people who care about our values and aren't afraid to speak up, we uncover Texas American Muslim University at Dallas. And it has been branding itself Tex A&M University. We got to give kudos to our friends at Texas Scorecard. If you're not a follower of Texas Scorecard, I encourage you. They uncover a lot of information, and they're bold and not afraid to put it out there. I'll bet you Jeff Leach and all these other squishy R's knew about this for some time, or just either complacent or even supportive or terrified to put it out there and stand for values. I'm really opposed to, as you guys know, and I think you join us, all these moderate Republicans who just want to go along, get along, and their goal is to be reelected and not really go and affect change. 24 years in the Senate for Cornyn. What are we, 10, 12 years into a Jeff Leach? There's a lot of these institutionalized moderates who just want to basically get reelected. We talked a lot about Cornyn. We might again, because there's indications that Trump could come out and endorse one of the two. I think we know who that'll be. I got to wonder, right, like why Washington, D.C. wants to spend $100+ million to get 6 more years of Cornyn. We do have to wonder that. So here we are, Texas American Muslim University in Dallas. It sounds an awful lot like Texas A&M system. And what they're saying is, our friends at Texas Scorecard said in a statement earlier this week, founder and board chairman Shahid A. Bajwa said the institution operates under a DBA, a doing business as, for Texas American Muslim University at Dallas. And there's a trademark dispute between Texas A&M and this entity, and A&M is engaged and sent a cease and desist letter. And once it got in the news, of course, then Governor Abbott engaged. But, man, I'm trying to understand how these folks at the Higher Education Coordinating Board didn't already have under control and manage. There's no way that we're going to let this happen. Well, I don't think so, conservatives. But, again, now we're distracted from ensuring that they lower property taxes, that they're not creating an unsafe road system by trying to protect foreign truckers like Leach and some of these other Republicans were trying to do, guys that can't read or speak English, like things that you and I are bread and butter that we need to focus on, just assuming that our elected officials aren't letting Muslim universities pop up and get accredited. The university, this Texas American Muslim University of Dallas, has said, we're doing STEM focused. We're focusing on the sciences and the maths and the hard sciences, but about 30% of our integrated teaching is going to be about Muslim studies. So they're trying to produce all sorts of engineers and doctors and substantive science graduates who have just under 1/3 of their teachings, their university accreditation, in Muslim studies, to integrate this into our communities and to send them off into corporate America and corporations in Texas, and send them off into medical school and other graduate programs to become more valuable in the system and to rise up. As we have heard, all of these recruiting videos, come to Texas, their children will pray to Allah. That's the attack. And I'm using that word deliberately. I'm not trying to create a religious conflict, but I view it as an attack on our value, because Islam is not compatible with individual rights, with free market, with a free mind, with an opportunity for every human to go out into the world and produce. It is just not. It discounts women, it discounts girls, it indoctrinates people into violence against infidels, right? Anybody who isn't a follower of Allah. And then when they don't have enough infidels to attack, quite often they're fighting among themselves. We being Americans and Texans, we tend to believe in a revelatory faith, that God reveals himself, and independent of our government, independent of the system that we live on, we have this Judeo Christian value system, a beautiful God, a revelatory God, generally a non-merit based God. We don't have to go and kill infidels who sit on Allah's lap, right? We are a revelatory group generally in our faith. if we are going to accept foreigners into America, number one, we need to make sure that we're integrating them. But number two, come for our values. All right. We had legions of Irish and Chinese and waves of Italians and others who have added great benefit to America. But they came for opportunity. They integrated. They learned a language, and they came primarily for our values. I'm really troubled that you and I and others, I'm sure this is the tip of the proverbial iceberg, right? That we just stumble upon this. We've learned last week that we're in year 3 of a closed public water park for Muslims only, and they're wearing burqas, and they're allowing men and women to swim together. However, you got to keep your eyes down and off of women. What are we doing using taxpayer-funded monies? And number one. Number two, probably more importantly, had you and I not stumbled upon this in year 3, the system would have just let it grow and let it fester. So Governor Abbott and many of our elected leaders are real quick once there's a headline or there's a blurb or a post that goes viral in conservative X channels, and we're talking about ourselves. Is this true? This can't be. Can't imagine that, that poor dad in the Metroplex, his wife was able to transition their 7-year-old without his approval and flee to California to do it, and there wasn't a law in place. There wasn't a system in place. In fact, the Texas Supreme Court, all Republicans, primarily appointed by Abbott, affirmed her ability to leave Texas to transition the kid, and the mom was caught telling him the boy was born, obviously a boy, and she was caught telling him, monsters, they're only after boys, so you can be safe if you're a little girl. And a mommy tells me I'm a little girl. Mommy dresses me like a little girl, like just heartbreaking stuff. We stumbled upon that. We had to fix it retroactively. That child's life is launched, and that mom fled the state, went to California, and transitioned that kid as best I understand it. Now we're stumbling upon this, year 3 in the Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth, of a publicly funded water park that is having Muslim-only days. And now we stumble upon, holy smokes, they've gone out there and organized and structured an entire university, Texas American Muslim University in Dallas, the first Islamic-centered institution in America. They're offering STEM coursework with integrated Islamic studies. Thank you, Texas Scorecard, for raising this to our attention, finding it, bringing it to our attention. But holy smokes, how have all the Jeff Leaches, the so-called Republican state rep up in the Collin County, and Angie Chin Button, so-called Republican longtime state reps, right there, how have they not exposed this? How is Governor Abbott, Higher Education Board, which governs and accredits all the institutions that have higher education in Texas, not already over this? These people are only reacting because you and I are out there fighting for American values, like the most fundamental values imaginable. Why aren't they doing this? We're electing them. Why is this go along, get along cabal continuing? We got so many significant issues. I don't know that we're going to be able to get through them all today, so we've got to move on, but everyone has to be acutely aware. Texas American Muslim University at Dallas, it's up there in Richardson, who has a Muslim mayor and a whole bunch of so-called Republican, moderate squish Republicans funded by our friends over at Texans for Lawsuit Reform, right? Jeff Leach, over $1 million. Angie Chin Button, I don't remember how much, but I think it's north of $500,000. So real conservatives can't or really struggle to take them out. We do have some victories over the TLR money machine, but not that many. All right, folks, if you're just joining us, this is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Make sure you're following us across all social media. We have 30-plus episodes on all the podcasts, Spotify, Apple, everywhere you'd expect, YouTube. Hundreds, if not thousands of people are listening to each episode. Please join us and sign up. On the website, we do a weekly one-page newsletter with a summary of events and information. Also, on our website, politicswithbigdogs.com, you can sign the petition, Let's Ban Taxpayer-Funded Lobbying. So, did you guys, I'm sure you saw, James Talarico, the Democratic nominee for Senate, just torched Cornyn, Senator Cornyn, the 24-year incumbent, running for reelection in the runoff here, on taxes earlier this week. And it was so shocking. It is just a sentiment that I'm not worried about. Let me just be clean. I'm not worried about Talarico, whoever the nominee is, because the guy's a radical nut. However, he does, speak well and tries to layer in religious teachings and beliefs. And in this instance, he has a really good policy point, and that's part of his appeal, right? Again, he's a radical nut. He'll be exposed. He's going to be defeated, period. But he really just torched Cornyn on the federal gas tax. Many of us may not realize that there's a federal gas tax. It's just under 19 cents, like 18.4, 18.6 per gallon. And it goes, it's just another way for the feds to get money. And the state does this too. The state is roughly 20 cents a gallon. So about 40 cents combined, just another taking from us, period. So, call it 3.5 weeks ago, Talarico comes out and says, hey, Senator Cornyn, on social media and other places, we're all feeling pain at the pumps, and yes, we are, because the president's fighting Iran, trying to defend our children and our grandchildren for 40 years. Iran's been sponsoring terrorism that targets U.S. soldiers and killing Americans and sponsoring attacks and death to America. I'm very grateful. I know the party is torn. I know the conservatives are torn in policy whether we should be engaging against Iran like this, but I am very grateful that President Trump has for 30 years. No other president's had the gumption. In fact, I'm hopeful he'll finish the job. Let's just handle him and be done with it so our kids don't have to. So anyway, back up. We have 19-ish cents per gallon going to the feds in federal gas tax. So somewhere late April, Talarico comes out and says, hey, Senator Cornyn, you're an incumbent Republican. Why don't you help suspend the gas tax? Temporarily suspend it while we handle the situation in Iran and save 20 cents or so, 19 cents or so per gallon for all the Texans. Cornyn just attacks it. We can't do that. This is a gimmick. You're going to explode the deficit. Well, I have a few problems with this on policy, not on the politics, right? On policy, period. I think the politics are different, but here's the rub. Number one, Cornyn's been there for 24 years, and we've seen this massive explosion of the debt and deficit. And we're finding waste and fraud everywhere in federal government, tens of billions of dollars. Nobody's been looking. So number one, it's like, hey, how can you spend 25 years up there, 24 years up there, and now claim that stripping out a hidden tax of 19 cents per gallon is going to explode the deficit, number one? Or number two, independent of deficit increases, why aren't we giving this relief to Texans, right? Well, how are you, the federal government, justifying that 19 cents per gallon? Show me. Any Republican who just their default position is we can't lower taxes because of deficit issues implies that all of the money they've gotten from us, the taxpayer, which is everything they get, right, exclusively funded by the taxpayer, is being used efficiently. There was no recognition whatsoever in the mind of Senator Cornyn that, number one, there's inefficient government where you could do a trade and have a net out, like if we knock down the 19 cents per gallon temporarily or permanently, that we couldn't make that up in wasted funds elsewhere, right? Zero recognition of that. And it's a gimmick and just an attack. Well, guess what? Earlier, a few days ago, President Trump came out and said, hey, folks, we might want to suspend the gas tax while we handle this situation in Iran. Well, man, that puts, right, Talarico and Trump in alignment. This is, frankly, what happened to old Jeff Leach and TLR. These guys got out of whack with conservative policies, and Tepper and these other Cornyn types, who are, by the way, who are all out there advocating for Cornyn's reelection, got out of whack with conservative values, conservative policy, and got exposed by Trump, who's not afraid to speak truth, to go out there and have a populist message and say, hey, we ought to suspend this tax. Well, then Cornyn had to backpedal, right, because the Democrat, Talarico, outflanked him on taxes. Kind of says everything we need to know. And frankly, we in Texas, we got to be real. Well, let's finish this and then we'll transition. And here it is. So Cornyn got outflanked on taxes, and then it's I don't know. Well, we don't really know what Trump was meaning with this temporary. Maybe that's okay while we handle this Iran situation. We'll just have to see. Like, it's embarrassing. It's just straight up embarrassing. And this is how far the so-called party of lower taxes has migrated. They just want to go and spend. And sadly, we're finding this in Texas. We've had explosive growth in state receipts of our taxes. And rather than give it back, spend $1 billion or more dollars to California movie producing companies that come in and film in Texas, right? Like, 9-ish billion more into the schools. Yet teachers, look at what they're doing to our children. Look at the indoctrination. Look at the growth of schools, and we've got to get some time into what's happening in the schools. I have fought in the school space for 20-ish years, and Republicans just avoid it. It is mind-numbing. It's very dense, but we'll have to go there. So let's go back on these taxes, right, and what has happened. Talarico outflanks Cornyn. He gets embarrassed. He gets sideways with Trump again, right? Just intuitively, poor Cornyn is by default not a Trump guy. There's no way around it, right? He just gets exposed over and over and over by Trump and by people like you and I who default into different basic values. But here's what we should be grateful for, you and I, conservatives, is that Texas Democrats aren't on message on an issue like this. This is an example of where Democrats could eat our lunch on taxes, and they aren't. And as a result of that, we're dominating at least in part, right? As a result of that and other issues, we are dominating every statewide office, and hallelujah, because Democrats in Texas are out there talking about ensuring that little boys and teenage boys get to use girls' bathrooms, that they get to transition their kids. That's their focus, and not issues like this, because the Cornyns of the world's default position is, oh, no, you can't lower taxes on the people. I won't have as much to spend. And if Democrats were out on message over a gas tax, like a state gas tax, and the Leaches and the Teppers and the Cornyn-esque state legislators, their default position be, no, you can't do that, because we have just lost our core value system. After 30-ish years, 30-plus years of dominance, all these guys have slid through just being ID'd as a Republican, even though they don't really want to lower taxes. They don't really want to protect our values. They just want to be reelected. I mean, there's a group out in Texas, running around Texas, telling Democrats, hey, run as a Republican, and I'll go get you money. And they're electing people. That woman, Stogner, who ran as a Democrat for railroad commissioner, is clearly a liberal, decided to flip and become a Republican and got all this Republican money. My understanding is now she's a DA, district attorney, so-called prosecuting, right, criminals in rural Texas. Well, I doubt her values have changed. I doubt that she is actually prosecuting. She just has an R by her name. That's what a big flank of the Republican Party has done over the last 40 years. Let's get the most moderate person, whether their value system is a D or a really soft R, and go get them elected because it's easier to get them elected. Well, okay. It's not an untrue statement. It is probably easier to get them elected if they're moderate. I mean, that's the whole basis of Cornyn. Hey, I'm going to be a stronger candidate in November because I'm a moderate. Okay, maybe that's true. The data is showing it's really not true. There's 1 or 2 points within the margin of error difference. And in some of these, Paxton is winning, is performing better, frankly, than Cornyn. But independent of that, is it worth it? Why are we electing all these moderates who don't want to affect policy, who don't want to reduce the size and scope of government, who don't want to empower free enterprise instead of just defending big business? Folks who don't want to give us tax relief. I mean, my goodness, if the Democratic Party were out there talking about the increase in the last 30 years in our property taxes and why the Republicans have done that to us Texans, they might start just kicking our butts. Look what Talarico just did in Cornyn's instant response. Oh, this is a scam. You can't do it. It'll give us a hole in the deficit. Are you kidding me? That should be a default position. Embrace the Democrat idea. In fact, lead with that idea yourselves. Let's strip out all of these takings, that's what it is at the state and federal level. It's takings from your pocketbook and my pocketbook and our children's opportunity to go and learn and eat and try something new because we have less money. We have less money to feed our kids, and these guys are just handing it out. Hot waffles going out everywhere to their little pals and to big business at our expense. So much so that this radical nutball, Talarico, with his crazy ideas, who says God is non-binary, and science has shown us that there are 6, not 2 sexes, but 6 unique sexes, which blows my mind. Talarico outflanked Cornyn in a default position on taxes, gasoline taxes. Are you kidding me? So anyway, we got to move on. There's so much here. There's so much going on. It makes me wonder. No wonder the guy's been in D.C. for 24 years, and no wonder Washington, D.C. is willing to pay over $100 million to get him back for 6 more. It is just shocking that any Republican, but certainly one as well-versed, seemingly as Cornyn on policy in D.C., would get outflanked by the radical Talarico on gasoline taxes. Holy smokes. All right, folks, this is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. We've got to move on. There's so much going on. And if we don't get it through it all in the radio show, know that the podcasts are longer. We have 54 or so minutes on the radio show, but we have more content in the podcast. The state of public education in Texas, actually the academic outcomes have increased more than they've ever jumped in 2 years in many of the districts. Sadly, it's the districts that the state has largely taken over. Mike Morath, the guy who's leading TEA, who's an incredible education leader, in my very strong opinion, had to take over HISD, Houston Independent School District, because the outcomes were so poor, such slippage. And, of course, the educrats, their top-to-bottom statement, well, we need more money, we need more money. It's absurd, right? Like, we have so many problems in public education. It's one of our largest, if not, it's our second largest or our largest expense at the state level, even though it's supposed to be locally funded. And part of the problem is we have so many districts. We have over 1,000 school districts in Texas, so you don't get economies of scale. And it tends to be, in my very strong opinion, because they're often the largest employers in the community. So folks don't want to let them go. And it's not just the teachers. A huge, massive swath of the employment base are quote-unquote administrators. You got a deputy assistant to the assistant, and it's just stunning. But now these school districts, 150 plus of them, have gone to 4-day school weeks. Teachers don't want to work as much. Institutions of higher ed have been churning out teachers who are indoctrinating our children, DEI and same-sex, and every kid gets an opportunity to transition. I had a deep argument. Frankly, it was a conversation in theory, but it turned into an argument with a bunch of public school teachers in the last 4 months, and 2 or 3 of whom were counselors who were like, you've got to let these kids transition. You don't understand. We know what's right. You don't. It was just stunning. I'm like, well, I'm a parent of a couple children, and no, I have an opinion. I'm reasonably well educated on this space, but they just thought, you have to let them do this, number one, and number two, we know and you don't, which has been the theme all the way through. So I'm really troubled that these school districts are like, well, we'll just go to 4-day school days. And here's why. We have tremendous slippage in school, tremendous. What's that mean? It means that academic outcomes are declining when children are not in school, right? It makes sense. And the best evidence, which has been shown in every state in the union for 40 years, to the extent that teachers allow data to be collected, which you're going to freak, they almost uniformly do not allow it. So we have tremendous slippage over the summer, right? And our school calendar came to be through agriculture seasons, right? We needed people off in the summers to help work the fields and pick the product. We have a 1-week spring break so they can go plant, right? Well, like the harvest moons and all of this acronyms that exist in our school calendars were around an agricultural community, which we no longer are, and we have machines, and children aren't doing that. So we have 2.5-ish months over the summer, and children slide back tremendously. They just had this slippage. And now some of these rural school districts, 150 or so out of Texas, over 1,000 school districts, have said, no, we're going to do 4-day work weeks, because we're having trouble getting teachers, and we're having trouble this, and it's all about the adults. It's not about the students, 100%. And we're getting more and more slippage because children are getting less time in instruction. It's kind of common sense. But my rub is Republicans won't get enmeshed. They just won't take the time to learn all of and it's a lot of jargon in education, public education. There's a lot of rules, a lot of federal overlay, but we have plenty of pretty good free market style Republicans who care about these issues in the legislature, and they want nothing to do with public ed committee, because it's grinding and the teachers just come and the principals come and everybody complains and whines. And historically, those committee meetings will go until 2 or 3 in the morning. And as a result, the people who engage in the public ed committees, who then get to draft and drive policy, are real liberal Democrats and real moderate Republicans, often people who've been on school boards and got elected by the school systems in their communities. So they're like, hey, we're here to take care of the principals. We're here to take care of the adults, because those are the people who vote. So what does that mean? People like you and I cannot implement rational policy. For example, and I worked deeply in this space for a long, long time. I haven't so much in the last 10 or 12 years, but I'm pretty enmeshed. So about 15 years ago, for example, people like you and I and others and myself learned that, oh, guess what? In Texas, there's an actual state law that said you cannot test children at the beginning of the year to see where they're coming in, and you cannot test them at the end if you can link that child's growth or flatlined outcomes or even decline in educational attainment, if you can link it to an individual teacher. So you can go and test those things, but only if you make it all anonymous, so a teacher cannot be singled out if they aren't performing. That was a state law. Can you believe that? Like, any of us, would we ever run a business or any other type of program where we couldn't test? I'm going to give you money. We, the taxpayer, are going to give you money and 9 months to go and perform, or 8.5, depending on how it works out in a school year. And we're going to see what the outcome is. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, no, you can't measure whether this program works or not. You can't measure whether this school is achieving or not. You can't measure whether this teacher is achieving or not. Isn't that astounding? It was a state law. And we fought, and basically have changed over the last 15, 18 years, a little hybrid, so you can kind of generally track how a student's coming in and exiting. But there's still tremendous teacher protection. So, and it's not anti-teacher, right? In an ideal world, 1 out of 30 teachers at worst is being flagged as, hey, everybody else is getting a child for 8.5 months. They're getting 8.5 months or 9 or 10 months of instruction. And holy smokes, 4 of these teachers out of the 30 are delivering what is a year and of academic outcome. Let's get them in mentoring some of the others. Oh, look at that. 1 out of 30, they had these children for 8.5 months. The children only learned on average 6 months. We've got to help that teacher. Right? That's how you would use data like this. No question about it. But that was affirmatively illegal. I mean, it was just shocking. The state couldn't come in and take over any of these districts in any real sense. Affirmatively illegal. They had passed all of these policies and programs, made them affirmatively illegal. So what do you have? You have multi-generational failures in elementaries that were and by the way, the A through F rating system, that was illegal, right? We had to go pass a law. I'm very proud of it. Every 2 years, the teachers' unions try to unwind that. And many of the Republicans have scaled it back because they're often these moderate leaders that come on Republican committee chairs and members who focus on public ed because the adults get them elected, and that's where their bread and butter is. So they're thinking about adult outcomes over children. And they're like, oh, we can't let our communities know that we have a C. Everybody rated school. Everybody thinks we have a A, and they're so happy with our schools. We can't let that information out there. They use every excuse. Oh, it's COVID. We got to block it. Oh, we got to pause it. Just shocking. Rating it A through F exposes the D's and the F's to the community. And they get to go, well, wait a second. Why is it that 1 mile away, that elementary school is a B and we're an F? What is happening here? It forces an alignment of all the realtors who want to sell the homes, right? People buy homes in large part based on public school ratings. And that's why the teachers unions and the administrators and TASB, all these publicly funded lobby groups where they're taking our tax dollars. This is the ban on taxpayer funded lobbying. Well, all dovetails together. That's why they're all opposed through A through F. They're all opposed to any academic outcome assessments of the students because they just want to say it's all sunshine, when in fact it's not. Our children are learning less and less, and they're learning transitions and non-binary and gender dysphoria. This is being taught in the schools. by the counselors and the public teachers, and it's why more and more Texans, as a percentage, are taking our children out. We're homeschooling them. We're putting them in private. We're putting them in charters that aren't messing with that nonsense, or charters that are focused on outcomes, like real gifts. So there's this movement in Texas, and most recently has manifested itself in 4-day school weeks. 4-day. These are not focused on outcomes. These are focused on adult needs and wants. And I got to ask, what's it do to that working mom, that single mom? Who's going to take care of her kid that 5th day? I mean, more and more schools become babysitters, and we see that. We see crime go up between 3:30 and like 5:30 when a parent gets home, because often teenagers are out running around when they're not in school and events occur. What happens on that entire 5th day, be it a Friday? I know you're trying to give teachers a break and give them time off and give the administrators time off. They really don't like the kids and having to deal with the kids, but come on. That's what you signed up for, and we got to go make this work, and we have to educate our children. We're just having slippage. Their math scores, their science scores, their reading scores are all downward trending and have been downward trending. Only in the places where the state has gone and taken over and aligned things, where the school board is replaced by people who don't care about adult outcomes the way that they care about child's outcomes, right? The objective is educating our kids, not an employment factory for adults who don't want to engage. So we've got this real big, scary trend of school districts just electing to do, we're going to do 4 days a week, not 5. Holy smokes. What are we doing to our children, and why? So know this is happening in Texas. Know that we have over 1,000 school districts, which is shocking. No economies of scale. Redundancy. A superintendent on average in Texas stays in a district for 3 years. Well, 3 years isn't enough time to know whether their ideas and their programs have worked or not. Probably ought to put them on 5- and 6-year contracts. And by the way, they, on average, I think they make like $270,000 a year. They just tend to want to go up the ladder to a bigger district to make more money. Sometimes some of these school superintendents, my understanding, is making like $450,000 a year. Look, I'd pay it if the outcomes were there. 100%, I'd pay it with a smile. But we ought to know that this big system is bleeding cash, and the internal of the TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards, and the teachers' unions, and all of these educrat efforts are geared toward outcomes for adults, not children. And it is the districts that are being taken over by the state and getting alignment that are having historic gains. But it does make you wonder, like, I don't think the state can take all the districts over. Why are we having historic gains in HISD and elsewhere, but those were failing for 20 and 30 years, just downward trends? We know we can do it. We know there's enough money in the system because it's being done. The real question is, are we going, you and I, the taxpayer and the parents and those who are engaged in the community, going to permit the schools to downtrend outcomes in lieu of adult benefits, a 4-day work week or otherwise? Is this what we want in our state? Is this what we want for our children? Because we can overcome. I strongly believe in incredible public schools. Strongly believe that every child should have, and indeed deserves, the opportunity to learn a great curriculum and taught by premier teachers and educators, because it's the only way that we can uplift everybody in society. If you're poor and you're black and you're brown or you're white, it doesn't matter what color you are. If you have access to a good reading curriculum and thoughtful engagement of the mind, you can go to Stanford or Harvard or UT or Rice, or you pick it. You can go and build rockets, become a surgeon, become an engineer, become anything you want, and get out of the trailer park in 15 years. Any socioeconomic level, access to high-quality education and scrutinizing thought and critical reasoning, along with the ability to read at grade level in the 3rd grade, you're golden. That is the great marker in life that you can go anywhere and do anything. And then the choice is yours as a child, as a young person, independent of role models, independent of whatever level of education your parents attained. you have that hope. You have that ability and that opportunity, and we in Texas want to provide it to you. So you and I, the listeners of this show, we just need to ensure that the adults get out of the way. Just get out of the way. If you're pushing your self-interest over the child's, go ahead and move on. Find something else to do, because we can do this, and we got this. We know how to educate children. We've just got to force the legislature to get out of the way, force the adults to get out of the way, and we can get this done. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Please make sure you're following us on social media and listening to all of our podcasts, helping us advance. Sign up for our newsletter, politicswithbigdogs.com. We have got to move on to another subject. Folks, we're running out of time. There's a couple of subjects that we're going to try to still hit. You know, is there a Republican war on safety in Texas? And Netflix. The Attorney General's office has sued Netflix in a fascinating expose. Well, it's a lawsuit, obviously, but I read it like an expose. And in summary, Attorney General Paxton's office is saying this: hey, Netflix, you have been encouraging Texans to set up these child profiles. You've been encouraging families, saying you're safe. You're not being tracked. Don't worry about it. We're not pushing ads. Only recently has Netflix given a different opportunity for people to subscribe and say, hey, if you want to pay less and see ads, you can do that model, right? But for years, Netflix has been saying, we're the safe ones. We're not Google. We're not any of these people who are tracking you, right? We're not Facebook doing all these massive trackings. Well, the lawsuit certainly says, and it exposes Netflix as the antithesis thereof. Even though at every step of the turn, anybody who's watched Netflix, they are encouraging you to set up a child's profile. We have them in our family. I'm feeling really outraged over this. 2 different children still have profiles and rolling through it. Well, internally, all these documents have shown that the Netflix engineers and leaders and chiefs are saying, we're not as much a television company as we are a logging company, like cutting down trees. And I thought, what does that mean, logging company? Well, here's what they mean. They are logging every single thing, every pause, every stop, every transition that our child makes in Texas. And they're doing it to you and I as well as adults. But it's different when it's one of our kids, right? A 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, and they're creating tremendous data. They often get their first names, right? And they get the profile pic of the character that they choose. They can cross-reference that with other consumer data, figure out the child's birth date, the sex of the gender, where they live, their education, attainment, and they're logging. It looks like 160,000 pieces of information every 30 minutes that a child is on there. I mean, I don't know how granular that is, but that's a shocking number to me. And what are they doing? They're then taking it out into the private markets and selling it, saying, hey, we have all this great consumer data on Anthony Holm and his children. Let me tell you what's motivating them. Let me tell you what shows they're picking. The skin color of the characters. Is it a princess versus, a fantasy war? What they're drawn to, and you can go and target to this kid. And the other big thing that they're doing is they being Netflix is automatically having the next show begin. So in 5 seconds or less after a child finishes a program, a similar show is automatically kicked up to them. Wow. That sounds like not that big a deal, but it really is, particularly when you have a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old who is getting all of these endorphins and all of this stimuli from a cartoon. You might remember I'm 53 years old, right? My era was Saturday morning cartoons, and I would sit in front of that TV starting at like 6 a.m. if adults would let me until they ended the cartoons at like 10:30. And I do remember being so hungry. But back then you couldn't hit pause. I didn't want to miss something. I'd run to the kitchen when there were commercials and I'd try to get some food real quick, and I'd go back if I could. And I'd often miss the first moment of the rest of the program, and it was bothersome to me. So this is what's happening with Netflix. They're automatically kicking it up to And our children are staying there longer and longer, and not because they're getting money to keep our kids there, Netflix, because it's a subscription model, right? You're paying the same flat fee, $17.99 a month or whatever it is, but because they're logging information about our kids, and then they're taking it out to the Googles of the world, to the toy manufacturers of the world, to the clothing manufacturers of the world, and they're selling it. This is how they're getting a lot more of their profit, more and more. Well, this is not an unusual event, right? Google does it. Facebook does it. It's infuriating to all of us. But Netflix has gone and told Texans for years, we don't do this, over and over. And all these earnings reports and, hey, this is the safe kid zone. This is a kid-friendly. Go ahead and do it. We're not tracking this stuff. And, in fact, they are. So that's deceptive trade in Texas by definition. And Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, has sued them in defense of our children and is going to get money and is going to probably force it to stop. Now, Netflix, of course, saying, no, it's all wrong and this isn't the truth. We look forward to clearing our name in court, right? But Paxton did this with Facebook, too. Facebook told Texans, we're not getting facial recognition. Your computer isn't looking at you. We're not looking at your pictures and identifying you by face. There was a state law in Texas that said you couldn't do that. You couldn't just do mass surveillance, right? And Facebook was lying about it. Paxton sued him and got, I don't know, a couple $1 billion, maybe several $1 billion for the state in payment because Facebook broke the law, number one. And then number two, most importantly, from my perspective, made them stop. So I believe that this is like a Facebook issue. Paxton also sued Google for violating state law and got a bunch of money for Texas for that. And in fact, maybe those are some of the funds that ought to be offsetting our state gasoline tax. We got a federal gas tax of like 19 cents. And if you just joined us, we had a segment on the show about this earlier. And we have, as I recall, about a 20-cent state tax as well. So like, 42 cents on the dollar of every 42 cents per gallon that we're buying is going into state and federal taxes for gasoline. Look, maybe we ought to use some of this Attorney General Paxton funds who's protecting us from big tech's lies and holding them to account to make up the difference in gas tax that Senator Cornyn doesn't want to repeal or temporarily suspend. He says, I can't do that. It's a gimmick, right? Where Talarico really outshined him on that one. But this is what's going on in Texas. We have all these platforms saying one thing and then doing the opposite all across America. But Attorney General Paxton, at least, and some of these other AGs I think are catching on too, are starting to defend their citizens and take it to big tech. Now, that's a heck of a task. There are very few attorneys general who can get that done because big tech has so much money and thousands of lawyers, and you have to go litigate, and they lie, and they deceive, and they cheat, and you go. But Texans had a great track record of taking these folks down, and I'm optimistic that at the very least Netflix will have to change its behavior and not be able to track children in Texas because that's what they're doing. Yeah, well, allegedly doing, but it's sure pretty dang clear to me, having read the filings. I think they've got them. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Thank you so much for fighting for liberty. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's go forth and conquer. Conservative values will overcome. God bless you, and God bless Texas.
Politics with the Big Dogs with Anthony Holm is supported in part by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. Learn more about today's guest and hear other episodes online in our archive. Visit politicswiththebigdogs.com. If you have a question for Anthony Holm, email Anthony at politicswiththebigdogs.com. From deep in the heart of Texas, you've been listening to Politics with the Big Dogs.